Hello everyone, welcome to the Simpit. I'm Andrew Fayash III and I'm here to cover iRacing's release of Dirt from the viewpoint of someone who races dirt. Now, I'm not a professional sprint car driver by any means, but I've got enough dirt experience to give a pretty good gauge of how well or how badly iRacing has hit the mark. First, let me quickly cover some of my racing experience so you guys know where I'm coming from. I personally raced a class called Roadrunners. They're kind of like street stocks from the 1990s. For a total of about 6 seasons. And at my home track, I won 7 of 22 feature races last season, and the championship as well. I've also a couple times driven a street stock, kind of like the one we have on iRacing right now on dirt, and a Northeast Sportsman Modified. Oh, and this, but I only got about half a lap before having a mechanical issue, and also I don't think that this car be very applicable or comparable to what we have available on the service right now. Bit old school. On the sim side of things, I've been in the NASCAR Peak and Free Series for all of its 7 seasons, and I'm coming off my best points finish of 9th last season. Now, enough about me, let's get dirty. Since it was announced last year, I tried my best not to get too excited or too hyped about Dirt coming out. If I said I wasn't pumped about it beforehand, that would be a lie. I had high expectations and hopes, and I must say iRacing has blown me away with what they've released. I'm thoroughly impressed with what they have here. Don't get me wrong, it has some issues, and I'll cover those, but even with those things in consideration, it's just plain awesome. So let's break it down a little bit. I'm going to list some pros and some cons. We're going to start off with the pros. First of all, dynamic tracks. I do have a footnote here that I'll cover in the cons section, but the track condition changing based on where people race is amazing. Your line, your driving style, and sometimes even your setup have to change to match the track conditions. If you don't move around to search for that perfectly tacky dirt, you're going to find yourself losing ground really quick to the other drivers that have found it first. The realistic feel. I cannot stress enough how familiar this feels to me. Yes, I know I've sim raced a lot prior, but those habits hurt me a bit at first. After a few laps on track, I noticed a few of my real habits kicking in. For example, in my real car, I have a weird habit. For some reason, when I'm comfortable and in the zone, I'll take my right hand off the wheel mid-corner and just countersteer my left, but I kind of just hover my right hand there. It's very weird, but I didn't know I did this until I put an in-car camera in my real car. And in the sim, I caught myself doing it within minutes of being on track in the street stock. My footwork is another example. When sim racing, I've always used just my right foot for both the throttle and the brake, because 2 feet felt awkward with the pedals being so close together for me. In my dirt racing experience, I've always used both feet. Again, without even thinking about it, just as if it were an instinct, I was using both feet on iRacing pretty quickly. As sometimes you need to give the brake a quick stab to help keep the car set in the middle of the corner, but lifting in addition to that would be a mistake. Another pro is the realism of the setups. I can't speak 100% for the higher end stuff like the sprint car for example, but even including them, so far everything I've tried adjustment wise that I know from real racing has worked exactly as expected. I can say for sure that the street stock specifically is on point with its adjustments. It's fun. It's an absolute blast to drive even if I'm struggling to keep up. Trying different lines to find grip, managing the wheel spin on the slick, battling for any position, pulling slide jobs and crossovers is just plain fun. Collisions. You could get away with a lot of contact without crashing. The beauty of dirt racing is that because you're sideways and technically out of control already, some contact won't necessarily ruin your day like it could easily do on asphalt. iRacing nailed this as well. You can bump and bang and just keep on racing. I do want to note that it may be a little too forgiving, at least with open wheel cars. Normally in sprint car racing, touching wheels with another driver is like flipping a coin on whether you'll flip the car. Currently, we can get away with some contact in those as well. Now on to the cons. I want to make a note that a lot of these are very nitpicky. I'm putting that asterisk out front so that you guys know a lot of these points are very, very minute and they really don't ruin the overall experience. First off, I got a couple notes. I know this is in my pros list, the dynamic track. The speed at which dynamic tracks change from fresh and wet to tacky seems about right, but from tacky to dry and rubbered up seems a bit too quick for me. I want to note that we are turning more laps in practices than a track would see in a normal night, But it seems like only 20 minutes of action with 15 cars has it already dried up and slicked off in the main groove. The starting groove for preset track states is usually in the middle of the track, and I personally think it should be across the majority of the track, just worn to the extent of the setting. As at places like Eldora where the extreme bottom or way up top are fast, having the middle groove worn out isn't going to change that at all. Getting mud on your own visor when driving alone. Again, I'm nitpicking at this point. Unless you're in an open wheel car, you shouldn't get any mud on your visor when you're driving by yourself. And even in an open wheel car, it doesn't happen as often as it seems to on iRacing. Hosted options. Now some of these iRacing's already mentioned are on their way for the future, so these are as of today.
First option I'd like to see is the ability to not count caution laps.
In real life, if you've got a 20 lap feature, you're going to get 20 laps of green flag racing action, guaranteed. In addition to that, iRacing lines up the field at the point of caution, whereas in real life they revert to the previous completed lap for the lineup. Track prep. Between practice and qualifying in the race, you've only got two options. You can either carry the state over from previous sessions, or you can generate a new track state. You can't just throw water on it or pack in the loose stuff like a lot of real tracks do, so maybe some more options there would be cool to see. The ability to run heat races in the same session as a main event. Now a lot of people have been asking for this for asphalt short track racing as well as dirt track racing. We can manually do this with a practice session before a race, but it takes having a good group of drivers who pay attention to voice chat and potentially some extra admins in order to pull it off. Tire grooving. Tire grooving patterns and techniques is a topic that comes up a lot around the tracks I've been to. Currently there's no way to groove the tires in iRacing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because everyone's on the same page, but it is still a real element that is missing that I want to make a note of. Wheelspin. It's really tough to feel or hear wheelspin in iRacing. An important part of being fast when the track is not optimal is managing your throttle versus wheelspin. Now, I can't totally fault iRacing for this one, as in real life this is mostly a seat of your pants type of deal, as well as a subtle RPM change that you've got to be used to in order to recognize it. That said though, in real life on a wet track where you're spinning the tires, it's common to feel the car surge forward when you initially lift off of the throttle. And I've yet to feel this in iRacing. I'm not saying it's not there, I'm not saying it's not modeled, I'm just saying it's a little bit tougher to feel. The damage model. Now this is more of a note for iRacing across the board than just dirt. There's some cases where it's a bit too forgiving and there's some cases where it's way too sensitive. It's something they've said they're working on and improving for the future, but currently it can be a bit distracting and sometimes frustrating. And that's it for the cons. Even though my nitpicky con list is longer than my pros, iRacing Dirt is just plain amazing. I can't stress enough how accurate the feel the cars are in all conditions, really. If you have iRacing and you haven't tried it, I have no clue what you're waiting for. If you don't have iRacing, I think it's well worth signing up and giving a shot. Just make sure you have a decent enough computer and a wheel and pedal setup of some sort before you join. I'd like to thank Sean Cole for the chance to do this episode of the Simpit, and my sim racing teammates for their inputs and opinions as well. If you've enjoyed this dirt coverage and you want to see more, potentially driving technique videos, maybe some setup lessons, please leave a like and comment on what you want to see. And to ensure you see it when it's released, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And in the meantime, enjoy the dirt.
I keep getting it, like my hands are all the way crossed over.
I just realized I was steering and that ain't gonna do